Welcome to United Jews channel.
Hi, my name is Ari S. I am here with Andrew Kirshner to talk about several political topics that have been very controversial in the past couple of years in America. And we are here to talk about them. Our opinions are different. We are here to debate certain topics such as abortion, immigration, and gun control. And we are going to share our opinions, make sure we are both heard, and propose possible solutions that we see as fit to the political issue that we are talking about. Andrew, do you have anything else to add to that?
We will be having very civil discussions. We will not be talking over each other. Make sure our voices are heard. Yeah.
And today we're going to be discussing the topic of guns in America and how whether we're pro or anti. I'm more on the anti side.
I am pro guns.
Andrew is more on the pro side. Yeah, he's pro guns. So I'll start. I do not see guns as necessary in America right now. I do not see them as beneficial in any way other than protection, which is fine. But the reason I'm anti-guns right now in America is because I feel like it's way too easy to get a gun, and the background checks and all the process that you have to go through to get a gun is way too easy right now, and I feel like that does need to be improved. I feel like getting rid of guns would also lower deaths from guns. If you look at Canada in 2012, the amount of deaths they had was 131 in that year, compared to America, which had 11,000 deaths from gun violence in total from that time. And yeah, it would save lives, even though I do understand that guns would still be prominent, like black market and stuff like that, and people are going to be able to get guns still, even when they're illegal. It's going to be much harder for people to acquire guns, and I do think that's better than doing nothing.
So there was a lot there. First, I believe that guns are meant to protect yourself, your family, and your property. They're meant to save lives, and that is why I think we need guns. And for when he talked about Canada, if you look at another place, United Kingdom, they removed all their guns, and almost immediately they started having a knife problem, stabbing sprees everywhere. It was an epidemic. They had to control it, and that's what happens when you take away guns. People will find other ways to be violent. And if you look at the gun death rate or deaths in America, a majority of that number is from suicides. So if you eliminate that number, the gun deaths is actually way less. And as more and more Americans are having guns, the homicide rate is actually decreasing.
Okay. As far as the knife, as far as the example with the UK, I do believe that once you got rid of all guns, I feel like you could do a lot less damage with the knife than you can with the gun. So I do think that still is better. Like, you can take a knife and shoot it at 50 people at once. So while knife crime has gone up in the UK, I think it's better than gun crime. I don't think suicides are like a viable reason to say gun violence isn't as bad as it is, because I mean, suicides could have been prevented if it weren't for gun violence, in my opinion. So, yeah.
But the thing with suicides is that if somebody uses a gun, what's stopping them from doing something else, like jumping off a bridge or something? See, there's other ways to, like, I don't want to be like so gory, but there's other ways to kill yourself than a gun. It's just one way. Like, there's no one stopping them. And you said something earlier about background checks. the background checks for getting a gun are extremely, extremely secure. They're not going to give you a gun if you're a violent criminal. If you're not deemed mentally stable, they're not going to give you a gun.
Okay. About the suicide thing and how you can kill yourself any other way. There are thousands of ways you could do it. Eliminating one of the ways I think may save some lives, not all suiciders, but some. It's up to chance, and I feel like getting rid of guns would lower the chance of suicides. As far as background checks aren't as intense as they are in other countries. So if you look at Canada, Canada does a background check every single day after you've already got your gun. Canada would do a
I think he's frozen.
if you pop up on the criminal record, then they will revoke your laws. And if the United States would adopt laws like that, I feel like I may be pro-gun.
All right, well, so you said something about how you want to take away guns to prevent them killing 50 people. That, as far as I know, happens on a very rare occasion if you're talking about the Las Vegas shooting. The guy who did that got his guns legally. He passed the background check. He was deemed mentally stable. He didn't have a violent history. His family members were surprised that that could happen. They never thought he could do it. See, with that particular case, the only way to prevent that specific thing from happening is to just remove all guns. But we can't do that because if your solution to removing to gun violence is taking away all guns, you would have like a buyback program. Australia had a buyback program, and they only took away about a third of the guns. People will still have guns, and also most gun crime in America is done with illegally owned guns, people who shouldn't have them in the first place.
Yes, I agree with that. So, and we have to make it harder for them to get guns, is what I'm saying. The 1/3 of the guns being bought back in Australia, I think that's helpful. That's 1/3 less guns. Again, I'm going to be using, I think Canada is like a very, very good example of what happens. So in Canada, for you to order a gun, once you go into the gun shop, you need to first pass a permit, like a written / hands-on test of using a gun. So kind of like a permit test card, like how you get your license in America for cars. And then they do an intense background check that lasts at least 28 days. Then you need to apply for a license after that, after you pass both tests. That gets approved by the federal government. And during that license, a person who has known you for at least 3 years has to make a personal statement saying that you are sane and that they know you're a good person who won't kill anyone. And it cannot be a family member. And then once you already have your guns, you can legally use a gun if you can only legally use a gun if you're going hunting or if you're going to a shooting range. And if you are going to one of those two places, you have to go straight from your house to the place that so the hunting or the shooting range. And you can't make any stops between there if you have a gun in the back of your car. So some of these laws that Canada does have, I feel like the US should implement. And if the US does implement them, I feel like the controversy of guns would go down.
Right, well, that law about you having to have a gun and going straight to the shooting range, straight hunting, that already exists in America. That's a law. You have to do that. And when you pass the background checks, you are mentally stable. You have to be mentally stable. You can't be a violent criminal. So these laws, the background checks are extremely strict. They're not going to give you a gun if they think that you're going to go out and kill a bunch of people. Those laws exist. Like the idea that background checks aren't strict enough, it is not like real because they are extremely strict. They're more strict than Social Security.
I would say that some of the background checks, there have been records of background checks that have been proven flimsy or not as mandated as they said they were. And I feel like, while there are very, very intense background checks in America, I feel like it's a lot easier for background checks to be slipped up and for people to pass it easily or get it illegally or use connections or whatever to get a gun.
Right. Well, you said they get it illegally. If you remove all guns, there will still be a black market for guns. And we know
Yeah.
that most gun crime is done with illegally owned guns. That gun crime will still exist regardless of whether you remove guns or not, because there is a black market.
No, I understand that, but I said that before. I said, even though I understand there will be a black market if you make all guns illegal, making them illegal would make them harder to get for the average citizen. And making them harder to get would prevent gun violence to a certain extent. It won't prevent all gun violence, but it will do it to a certain extent. Also, I'd like to bring up that the NRA has a very, very, very big influence on like the political sphere. So they pay a lot of the politicians, not necessarily bribes, but the money itself kind of like gives them a lot of power in the political sphere. Whereas in Canada, their rifle association has a lot less implement in politics, and that kind of allows laws in Canada to be passed a lot faster concerning guns than in America.
Right. Well, the NRA, while it does provide money for politicians, it's not nearly as much as people think. They're not anywhere near the top companies that provide money for politicians. If that's your argument, it's not really a good one, because it's not anywhere near to how much other companies. If their problem is providing money for politicians, there's much more companies and organizations that you should look at if you want to prevent that from happening. And it's also not necessarily bribing. It's what they do is this legal term called lobbying, which is basically legal bribery. And I agree with you. If you're saying you want to get that away from stop that from happening, I agree. Lobbying is just as bad as bribery, and that should be not implemented in America.
I agree with the second part that you said, but I think bringing up the NRA's influence in politics is a valid argument as far as talking about guns. Sure, there are other organizations that also lobby money and have other influences in politics, but that's aside from gun violence, and the NRA is a big one that does have influence on politics and kind of prevents a lot of laws to be passed. One more thing that I'd like to bring up is that in Canada, everything is federally mandated. All gun laws are federal, where in the United States, it's based on the states. So in the United States, 43 states now require permits for long guns, 36 now require permits for handguns. Magazine capacity is limited in only 42 states. There were no background checks at gun shows, and 12 states allow open carry, which in Canada is not allowed. You cannot have a concealed or an unconcealed weapon in public unless your job requires it to. So like unless you're a police officer, you are not allowed to carry a gun in public, where that is legal in many states.
So a couple points that you made for the gun show thing. Gun shows also have background checks. Gun shows and buying guns online, they also have gun background checks. People can't go to a gun show and buy a gun from a licensed seller without passing a background check. There's another myth. And as far as open carry,
it's going to gun shows, and it's not in every state. It's based off the state. There are a handful of states that do not do background checks when you walk into a gun show.
I'm pretty sure I think it's federal. You have to have a background check from going into a gun show. But I'll move on to the next point. You said open carry. I don't really know where I stand on open carry. I think as long as it's concealed, it's okay. Because if someone's threatening you in person, attacking you, you have every right to defend yourself and your family. So I think that open carry, as long as it's concealed, if you're just going around with a gun on your waistband and it's open, that intimidates people. I don't think that's okay. But you have every right to defend yourself. That's the point. That's the point of the Second Amendment. It's there to protect yourself, your property, and your family. That's why I'm very for it. You should have a law that states that you can do that.
Do you think that there are amendments in the Constitution that are very outdated that don't necessarily apply to us 300 years in the future?
Well, yes, but this one still does. People still use guns to defend themselves. That happens repeatedly almost every single day. Gun defenses count for a huge number. I think it's almost over a million, where people use guns in self-defense. And I think that's very important for keeping the Second Amendment.
I disagree. I think that right now, bearing arms is, I think it's applicable once you're in your house and let's say there's an intruder, you have the right to bear arms. I don't think that should be brought outside the house and in any public scenario when there are police present everywhere all the time, when there's law enforcement everywhere. That's supposed to keep you safe. They're trained to handle firearms, rifles, guns, whatever, in public. And I feel like it should be left up to them to, since they are trained, and not trained enough, but since they are trained to carry guns, I feel like it's them who should be doing everything in public.
So I agree there should be more police training, but that's not really relevant. So what we're saying here is you walk out into public, there's law enforcement everywhere. In the blink of an eye, if somebody's attacking you, law enforcement can't stop that right away. There's not law enforcement at every single area in America. If you have that gun right at your waistband, you can shoot someone into self-defense.
Yes, and a lot of mistakes can happen with that. So I just, unless you're trained on how to handle guns in like public situations, I don't think that a gun is necessary.
Right. So you want police to have guns, right? But would you agree that there are some policemen who unlawfully kill people?
Sorry, you broke out.
So you believe that police officers should have guns, right? Do you think that the police should be, do you think police mistakenly kill people?
Just like citizens, just like regular citizens, I believe that they do kill people with the right training that they go through. Again, we're not going to get into that, but with the training that they're supposed to go through, I feel like the room for error is a lot less with a cop than with a regular citizen.
Well, when a citizen can go to the shooting range, get as much training as they want, right? So you can go to the shooting range.
I mean, it's not just training in like shooting a gun. It's training in the sense that learning how to handle talking with people, or learning how to de-escalate, or learning how to consider any other options before you just, pull out a gun. I think that's necessary.
Okay, but that's a very iffy situation. If somebody's threatening you with violence, you should have the right to defend yourself. If somebody's attacking you with, let's say, a knife, or just going up against you, trying to fight you, you should have the right to defend yourself, right?
Yeah, I agree.
So what other weapon could defend yourself better than a gun?
I think a lot more harm could be done with a gun than any other weapon. So if you look at the UK, they brought out knives. I think knives could do enough harm but also cap it off to the point where you can't do as much damage with a gun. With a gun, you could accidentally kill someone. With a knife, you could do that too, but it's a lot harder with a knife than with a gun.
So the only problem is killing someone, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, if you're trained with gun training, uh, you know where to kill, where to shoot the most harmful places. You know where to shoot to head or shoot in the heart. You know those are like virtually instant kill. But if you shoot them in the leg, that just stops them, arm, stuff like that. If people want more training, they'll know. And I believe that people should have the right to defend themselves. If someone's threatening their life, they should protect their life by uh, killing the other person. And that self-defense law exists in many states, and I think that's a good one.
I feel like self-defense is legal everywhere in America, but again, in public, I'm not too sure about that. Do you have any solutions on whether or not you can make guns less of a controversial topic than it is right now?
Well, the problem that needs to be addressed is the illegal gun crime. I don't know how you can mandate that, but there are steps that can be taken, um, such as going in and if somebody knows someone with an illegally owned gun, like you might have like connections, like you said, you brought up earlier, to people who have these illegally owned guns. If we can stop them, I think a great solution to that is securing the border, which we're going to get into later, but because that will stop.
Did you say securing the border?
Huh?
Did you say securing the border?
Yeah, because
Okay.
guns come in through the southern border. That happens a lot, and I think that if we stop that, that'd be great.
I think the majority of guns do not come from, even though some do, and a lot of things do get kind of like moved through the southern border. I think that's a very minute. I think that's a very minute kind of. So that's a very minute cause of all the gun violence that happens. Most of the guns that were used in gun violence cases were bought while closing the border for guns will minimize the amount of gun violence or just people with guns that could potentially shoot someone. I feel like most of this stuff, I don't think that closing down the border will have a great effect on gun violence. I feel like that would not do much. I've met with some of the people from like the Parkland High School shooting. Two of them were on my cruise. I met them, and while we were talking, I mean, like the experiences that they went through with the kid coming up and like killing everybody. America is the only country who has had the amount of cases like this, and I feel like that is highly due to the laws and how the laws are not strict enough and do not amplify enough strategy to minimize gun violence. I feel like if America would do more in terms of background checks and everything, making sure someone could pass a written test, hands-on test of how to use a gun, I feel like the traumatizing experiences that a lot of people went through would be minimized. I feel like more people experience trauma through gun violence than people who use it in self-defense. More than that is true. More people are traumatized mentally from gun violence than people who use it as self-defense.
Okay, well, so there's a lot there, and you brought up the Parkland school shooting. The guy who shot up Parkland, he took his gun from his mom, so who legally had the right to have it. The Parkland school shooter was on the watch list. He was on uh, 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 not mentally stable, and that's why he would not be able to own a gun. The only reason he was able to get it was because his mom had it. And with school shootings, I think the best way to prevent it is to have an armed guard at every single school, because I can bring up Maryland. Maryland had a school shooting that was prevented because there was a guy with a gun on the scene right there, and he stopped the school shooter, and nobody died, and that's a really good thing. So if there was a armed guard, maybe two, at every single school, that could prevent school shootings from happening. And school shootings are being like being brought up in the light, and if they're happening more, which they are in America, that's how you prevent it. There's a solution. I don't think taking away guns is the solution, because there will still be guns in circulation and gun crime will still be happening.
I agree. I think providing an armed guard would be beneficial. My school has a police officer who's always there during lunch, during school hours, that stands there just in case something happens, in case something violent happens. So I do agree with you on that. I think that is a viable solution to protect kids in schools having guards there. I feel, like I said again, if there are laws like that are implemented to keep people safer around guns or making it harder to get guns, I'm okay with them. I'm not the type of guy to just say get rid of all guns. If there are laws passed making it harder, then I'm okay with them. I feel like if we could adopt Canada's system, that would be best.
Okay, so you're bringing up the Canada system a lot, and you say you do want guns. So if we have guns, which are good, which protect our lives, that is beneficial for all Americans. I mean, having a gun in your home is very safe. We can look at a city in Georgia, Kennesaw, Georgia. Every single house has a gun, and they have one of the lowest gun crime rates in the country, like a 0.03 per 100,000. It's very low, one of the safest places to live in the country. And I think if having a gun in the home is prevents gun crime, that is good. And we can have concealed weapons. It's also good. And you say stricter background checks. I think they're already very strict. And having a guard at school, also a guard at every school, is a very viable solution, like you said, like you agree. Yeah.
Yeah, I think guns. I'm anti-guns until there are going to be a set amount of laws or rules that people have to follow to help incorporate them into our society. I feel like right now we're still kind of lacking, but like you said, in the future, once laws are passed, once we get guards at schools, I think we can come to an agreement and make the topic less controversial.